Imagine a warrior marching through Makkah with a drawn sword, fully intent on ending the life of the man leading a new religion. Now imagine that same man becoming the faith's most legendary protector. This is Umar ibn al-Khattab. In the early 7th century, he was a physically imposing, decisive, and highly feared member of the Quraysh tribe. At the time, the followers of the Prophet Muhammad were a persecuted minority. They were forced into hiding, unable to pray in the open without facing immediate retaliation. Islam faced a severe existential vacuum of power, and in those early days, Umar was its most lethal, uncompromising threat. One afternoon, Umar set out to locate and kill the Prophet. But on his way, he was stopped by a rumor that hit closer to home. His own sister had secretly converted. Enraged, Umar stormed toward her house, fully prepared to use force against his own family to stop the spread of this new message. But as he entered, he heard the recitation of the Quran. Listening to the weight and the rhythm of the verses, his hostility began to collapse. A warrior who had built his reputation on unrelenting force was disarmed by a spoken sentence. His focus abruptly shifted away from the Prophet and inward toward his own soul. Umar went directly to the Prophet, dropping his enmity and pledging his absolute loyalty to the mission he had just tried to destroy. The impact was immediate. With a man of Umar's stature on their side, Muslims finally had the protection required to stand and pray openly at the Kaaba. Because of his ability to judge between complex truths, the Prophet gave him a new title, Al-Farooq, the distinguisher of truth and falsehood. Years later, following the death of Abu Bakr, Umar was appointed the second Caliph of Islam. Under his leadership, the Islamic State saw a staggering geopolitical expansion. His administration integrated Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and Persia into a unified governance. In just a few years, he had transitioned from a local tribal fighter into the commander of a global superpower. Despite commanding an empire that rivaled the scale of Rome, Umar lived in absolute simplicity. To stay connected to the people, he would take anonymous night patrols through the streets of his capital, Medina. During one patrol, he heard children crying from inside a small home. When he investigated, he found a mother boiling stones in a pot, trying to trick her starving children into thinking food was cooking so they would fall asleep. Devastated, Umar rushed directly to the state treasury to retrieve bags of grain and supplies. He hoisted the heavy sacks onto his own back and carried them to the woman's home himself, refusing any assistance from his aides. When an aide offered to take the load, Umar asked him, "Will you carry my burden on the day of judgment?" To Umar, supreme power was not a privilege, it was a divine liability. In 644 CE, his reign came to a sudden end. He was fatally stabbed by an assassin while leading the community in the early morning Fajr prayer. Even while facing death, his focus remained on the stability of the people and the welfare of the community, rather than personal grievance. After his passing, he was buried in Medina, resting eternally beside the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The ultimate measure of his leadership was that his final thoughts were dedicated to the duties of his office, not the preservation of his own life. Umar's administrative footprint remained for centuries. The regions he integrated, from North Africa to Syria, adopted social and legal frameworks that would define their development for generations. But while the maps show his expansion, his real revolution was an internal one. He took the role of an emperor and turned it into the role of a servant. He established a standard of accountability that was terrifying in its scope. He famously stated that if even a dog died of hunger on the banks of the Tigris River, Umar would be held responsible by God. Al-Farooq's greatness wasn't forged by the sword he drew in his youth, but by the heavy, humble weight he was willing to carry for the weakest lives under his protection.